Kyiv is currently being abandoned due to fears of an imminent attack. With a growing threat of a Russian offensive, citizens are fleeing en masse, overwhelming highways with massive traffic jams as they seek refuge in an uncertain destination. The news of the suspension of U.S. military aid has severely impacted the morale of Ukrainians, leaving them without crucial support against an impending assault. As Russian forces intensify their attacks on military installations in Kharkiv, Odesa, and Sumy, the capital is turning into a refugee camp, with thousands desperately trying to escape before it's too late. In Kyiv, panic has escalated in recent hours, sparking an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Major roads connecting the city to the rest of the country are blocked by endless lines of vehicles as residents attempt to flee, believing their only chance of survival is to leave. Images released by the media outlet Izvestia depict the chaos. The previous night was particularly tense, with the deafening sounds of explosions echoing through the capital as Russian forces intensified their attacks. Ukraine's air defense system, overwhelmed by the scale of the assault, was unable to withstand the ferocity of the offensive. One attack after another, the cities of Kharkiv and Odesa also fell victim to these strikes, leaving behind destruction and fear. Meanwhile, the Sumy region near the Russian border suffered attacks on its ammunition depots and armored vehicles, critical resources for Ukraine's military. The question on everyone's mind is whether Kyiv's mass exodus is justified. The desperation is palpable as endless lines of vehicles stretch along escape routes, a testament to the sheer terror gripping Ukrainians. Fear of a Russian attack has driven thousands to make the perilous decision to flee, regardless of the consequences. However, many question whether they will find a safer haven. The Russian army has been relentless, and as the situation worsens by the hour, citizens' hopes are fading. Meanwhile, Ukraine's armed forces face increasingly dire circumstances. The lack of international support, particularly from the US and Europe, is becoming more apparent. Washington's decision to suspend military aid to Ukraine has been a devastating blow to President Volodymyr Zelensky's government. According to reports from Bloomberg, this decision followed a direct confrontation between Zelensky and Donald Trump, after which the U.S. president decided to cut all assistance to Ukraine until the country demonstrates a clear commitment to a peaceful resolution of the conflict. This shift in international policy has left Kyiv without support from one of its key allies, further exacerbating the crisis in the city. Ukraine's armed forces now face a bleak scenario. The shortage of equipment and weaponry, coupled with the disruption of intelligence supply chains, threatens to collapse what little remains of the front lines. Military analyst Yuri Podolya warns that the situation could deteriorate significantly in the coming months, as Ukraine lacks the resources to sustain its defense for much longer. By the end of May, Ukraine's military could be entirely overwhelmed, unable to hold its ground against the advancing Russian forces. The suspension of U.S. military aid has had consequences beyond the battlefield. The morale of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians has reached an all-time low. The Western promise of support, once their only hope for resisting the Russian operation, has been shattered by Washington's abrupt decision. Now faced with dwindling resources and international abandonment, fear grips every corner of Kyiv. Families fleeing on the highways do not know if they are making the right decision, but the overwhelming sense that the end is near pushes them to leave everything behind. Meanwhile, the situation near the Russian border in Sumy paints a grim picture. Russian strikes on Ukrainian ammunition depots and armored vehicles have left Ukraine's military without critical resources for defense. The Russian offensive appears to be systematically weakening Ukraine's forces, leaving no room for effective resistance. As panic spreads in Kyiv, the long convoys of vehicles trying to escape illustrate an atmosphere of unparalleled desperation. What once seemed like a war that could be resolved with international support has taken a dark and dramatic turn. The lack of aid, Ukraine's military's growing inability to maintain control over key cities, and the looming threat of a massive Russian attack have left civilians with no options. The once vibrant streets of Kyiv are now deserted, turning the city into a refugee camp as people try to escape the devastation. The war, which already feels like an endless ordeal, shows no signs of stopping. Ukraine's armed forces appear to be on the verge of collapse, while international pressure on Zelensky continues to mount. Trump's decision has completely altered the course of the war, deeply affecting perceptions of Ukraine's resistance. Kyiv, once a symbol of Ukraine's fight, is now seen as a ruined city where civilians attempt to flee in a desperate bid for survival. As time runs out for Ukrainians, the mass exodus of civilians is a response to the overwhelming fear and the grim reality that resistance may no longer be possible. Meanwhile, uncertainty looms. Will the attacks continue, or will Ukraine ultimately fall to Russian forces? Thousands remain trapped in this nightmare, with no clear path forward. The situation in Kyiv has reached a critical turning point. The mass exodus of civilians, the overwhelming fear, and the suspension of U.S. military aid have left Ukraine in an increasingly desperate position. The Russian offensive continues to advance relentlessly, targeting military infrastructure and further weakening Ukraine's ability to defend itself. With international support dwindling and Ukrainian forces struggling to maintain their positions, the reality on the ground appears more dire than ever. The collapse of Kyiv, once a stronghold of resistance, now seems inevitable. This crisis underscores the devastating human cost of war. Families forced to flee with no guarantee of safety, soldiers left without the means to fight, and a nation teetering on the brink of defeat. As time runs out, one question remains: how much longer can Ukraine hold on before its defenses are completely overwhelmed? If you want to stay informed about the latest developments in Ukraine and the impact of global decisions on this conflict, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue bringing you crucial insights into one of the most pressing crises of our time. Stay tuned for more.